We have an absolutely massive rumor to take a look at today. Could we see two major superstars wind up in Chicago this offseason? Plus, are the New Jersey Devils on the verge of trading for another NHL goaltender? We also have news from the NHL waiver wire. The Ethan Bear signing's finally official. Several injury updates and more action from the World Juniors to discuss as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a pretty crazy rumor involving the Blackhawks possibly acquiring a couple of major superstars this offseason. We'll get to that in just a few moments' time. First, we have a few other details and news notes to look at from around the NHL. Of course, a couple of things happened last night, some very interesting games. We saw a record set, actually, a game that we did not expect to be a blowout or a rout, but the Pittsburgh Penguins had a lopsided 7-0 victory over the New York Islanders. It was a case of the Penguins absolutely exploding in the second period, and the Islanders had no response, which is kind of unusual. Are we shocked the Penguins won? No. Are we shocked any team really coming out of the Christmas break may have had a rough start or a little bit not readiness in their game? No, but this was not expected whatsoever. Chris Letang, however, did do something that's never been done in the NHL before. He put up 5 assists in that outburst in the second period, becoming the first NHL defenseman to ever record 5 assists in a period like that. So that's quite a record for him. It was an absolute explosion last night, and I would imagine the Penguins are going to look to build on that, and I suspect the Islanders are going to want to snap out of that and wake up right away. The Islanders had a good first half of the season, or obviously the first half's not quite over yet, but first chunk of the season going to the Christmas break, they certainly don't want that to turn into something more. That's a pretty crazy game. Of course, Connor Bedard was in full effect last night, scoring a couple of beautiful goals, including the overtime winner, the Blackhawks over the Winnipeg Jets, in a low-scoring 2-1 affair. But Bedard was certainly putting on his skills in full display last night. If you did miss it, I highly recommend you check out those highlights. As I mentioned, the Ethan Bear signing in Washington is finally official. Washington today announced that Ethan Bear has signed a 2-year deal. The average annual value for cap purposes will be $2.062 million. So Ethan Bear should be getting into game action here soon. It's also been reported that Max Pacioretty is very, very close. He should play within the next week as well, and TJ Oshie also pretty close to returning. So it could be an infusion of talent to the Capitals lineup. They did not have a good game last night against the New York Rangers. We'll see what happens when these guys get into their lineup here, and if they can kind of help have a solid second half of the campaign. We also had news from the NHL waiver wire today. We have goaltender Michael Hutchison on waivers for the Detroit Red Wings, as well as Buffalo Sabres have forward Tyson Jost on waivers. Jost has not really performed all that great for the Sabres. They're looking to make room on their roster as well, with Girgensons getting ready to come back, and Hutchison also needed to make room on the roster for Alex Lyon, who will be returning and participating here in their next game. Several other roster updates now with the Sabres as well. Tage Thompson, of course, missed their game against the Bruins last night. He was out due to personal reasons. We don't know what's going on. We may not find out. And he is not a given to play on Saturday. He might be there, but they don't know yet. So he's been moved to the non-roster section of the the section of the roster that's non-roster. So he essentially doesn't count against their 23-man roster. So obviously the Sabres, another tough loss against the Bruins. The season's not going well. Having a player like Tage Thompson miss time, obviously not good for the team, but given the fact it's a personal situation, we don't know what he's dealing with, but it's kind of a looks like 50-50 that he could play on the weekend. Nashville Predators defenseman Tyson Barrie is also out. He's dealing with an injury and is considered day-to-day. For tonight's game with the Montreal Canadiens and Carolina Hurricanes, the Habs were able to activate defenseman Jordan Harris, and they did send Emil Heineman back to the American Hockey League. Cole Caulfield did miss practice this morning. There was some concern by, the fans that he might be dealing with something. It looks like he probably is, because he was getting treatment for something, but he is in the lineup for tonight's game. Like I said, Alex Line returns for Detroit and will get to start in their game tomorrow. The Columbus Blue Jackets, last night they lost Zach Werenski due to an injury. Don't know the full extent. They have not really announced the next update that I've seen as of yet, but it looked bad, and he had no weight on that left ankle going off the ice. It all looked pretty serious. So, Werenski's dealt with a few other major injuries in his career. So, this team is obviously already dealing with a lot. It would really be a big blow to lose their top defenseman as well. So we'll have to wait and find out more on that situation. Some more World Junior action today as well. We saw 2 games be completed today. The early game featured Team USA against Team Switzerland. The Americans pulled off a major 11-3 victory. No big surprise. The Americans were the big heavy favorites in this game. Blues prospect Gabriel Perreault had a hat trick. Gavin Brindley, the Blue Jackets prospect, also scored a couple of goals. Frank Nazar had 4 assists. This team is absolutely juggernaut offensively. So we'll see how they do against the tougher competition, of course. But the Americans had themselves quite a day. Obviously, the Switzerland team putting up 3 goals against the American team is actually not too bad considering all things. The second game of the day in the later game featured Sweden against Germany, and we saw the Swedes shut out the Germans 5-0. It didn't really feel like that type of game, though, to be honest. It was well into the second period, and it was still only 1-0 for Sweden. We ended up getting a hat trick from another Blues prospect, Otto Stenberg. Good day for St. Louis Blues prospects for sure. Team Germany only mustered 15 shots, so as much as Sweden got the shutout, the goalie didn't see a ton of action. The German team did kind of hold their own and kind of stay in the game for really the better part of 2 periods. It was mostly in the third when things started to get away from them and Sweden started to pile on the goals. So obviously that puts Sweden and the Americans both to a 2-0 record. So action picks up again tomorrow with several games. We'll see what happens there, and we'll recap those games in a video once those games are over tomorrow. A couple other announcements regarding a couple of former NHL players getting into the coaching world. The Minnesota Wild have hired former NHL defenseman Cody Franson. He's going to join their American Hockey League affiliate in Iowa to be an assistant coach. And former NHL players Zach Smith, mostly played with the Ottawa Senators, a little bit with Chicago at the end, has been hired as an assistant coach with the Western Hockey League Swift Current Broncos, which is pretty close to home for him and a place where he played his junior hockey as well. So obviously Zach Smith, a hardworking bottom 6 centerman throughout his career, certainly should be a good fit there as well. Now, as I mentioned, we have some trade rumors to take a look at today. A very interesting rumor that came about regarding the Blackhawks and a couple of NHL superstars. We'll get into that here in just a moment. But before that happens, are the Devils on the verge of making a trade for a goaltender? There's a lot of NHL reporters that feel that something might be brewing in New Jersey. We talked yesterday that they recalled Nico Dawes, and then the explanation from head coach Lindy Ruff was that he was coming up to see NHL reps. He wasn't coming up due to one of their goalies being hurt or anything of that nature. So that was a little bit surprising. We know the Devils haven't been completely thrilled with their tandem, of course, of Vanecek and Schmid. And then today they announced that Schmid was being sent down to the American Hockey League. Now, he's still young enough and inexperienced enough that he does not need waivers, so it's still an option to do that. So they've sent Schmid down. They brought Dawes up. And like I said, the rumor mill is really churning that there's, really working on a goaltender trade. Now, some NHL reporters felt the most likely goaltender that they were targeting was John Gibson out of the Ducks organization. Obviously, John Gibson has been rumored to be available for trade for well over a year. Of course, his numbers may not look the greatest, given the fact he's been on a bad Ducks team for a number of years now, but he is a really good quality goaltender. Unfortunately, doesn't have a ton of experience when it comes to postseason and things like that, because for the better part of the Gibson era there, for the most part, they haven't really been a playoff team for a long time. So, it's been a while since he's been on a competitive hockey club, but he has certainly, in his early days, they were certainly better than they have been more recently. So we'll see what the New Jersey Devils might do. They do have lots of interesting players. I think that would be intriguing to the Ducks. Will they include a goalie going back like a Kierschmidt, or maybe Nico Dawes is going to be kind of, given a chance to be showcased? Is that a possibility? I don't know. It would make sense that if they're going to acquire Gibson, that one of them could be moved. Clearly, they have some other younger players that are interesting as well. There's lots of prospects that are, I think other teams would like. So no doubt that they could make an offer that would be very intriguing to the Anaheim Ducks. There's lots of talk as well about other goaltenders. I think Gibson and Jake Allen seems to be getting the most, probably play in the rumor mill. He's the name that seems to come up the most in most circles when it comes to teams looking for goalies. But when it comes to the Devils, he's been mentioned there, but Gibson is a name that I've heard more often. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how this turns out and what their target is and how it all plays. But are the Devils working on a goalie trade? That's what many think. Time will tell. I know a lot of NHL insiders said that once the roster freeze was lifted after the Christmas break, that we were likely going to see a break in the goalie trade market, that we're likely going to see a goalie or two change teams and kind of get the market moving here a bit and open things up. And while it looks like that very well could be in the works. So stay tuned. We might have an actual trade in the goalie world to discuss here in short order. Now, as I mentioned, could we see two significant NHL superstars both make their way to the Chicago Blackhawks in the offseason? Now, there's certainly a rumor. This rumor comes from there's a show called Game Notes by Spit and Chicklets with Colby Armstrong and Matt Muriel. I personally don't really care too much for the Chicklets podcast, but I do like this version with Game Notes. I do like Colby Armstrong. I know he's obviously works in several media markets, works for some of the networks in the States, does some stuff with the Penguins, does some work with Sportsnet. He's just a very likable, funny, former player to listen to. And of course, Matt Muriel, a former player that he knew from his early days with the Penguins as well. And their sidebar show, I guess is what you want to call it, or a spinoff of Chicklets. They, in their most recent episode that I was taking a look at some clips here today, they were talking about a rumor that they came across, Muriel came across, about Elias Pettersson and William Nylander both being interested in going to the Blackhawks this offseason. Now, these are not trades we would see this season. Now, keep in mind, William Nylander is a pending unrestricted free agent. So if this happens, it would be a UFA signing. In the case of Elias Pettersson, he's a pending restricted free agent. So that would have to be a trade, maybe even a sign-and trade. Now, we saw what Matthew Tkachuk did in Calgary. So obviously, it would not be surprised if we do see another RFA in the near future pull that type of same strategy where they get the extra year on their contract by signing with their existing club and then being dealt. So that all would be part of a big package deal that would be agreed upon first. Now, the reality here is that I'm not convinced that both of these players or either of these players at this point are 100% going to be on the move. Now, Pettersson was a surprise to hear this being mentioned, to be completely honest. We know that he has hesitated to sign long-term. He wanted to see where things were going in Vancouver first. Wasn't too worried about it being an RFA. Wanted to bet on himself, have another good season, see where the team direction is before he decided a long-term deal. Now, the Canucks are doing extremely well. They've been hovering in the top couple spots of the NHL standings. They're well on their way of making the playoffs this year. Why would he up and want to go now, of all times? And really, I think at the end of the day, it would boil down to money. I don't know what the Canucks are going to be willing to pay him. Obviously, he's going to be looking for a big commitment. Does he want the 8-year deal? Not necessarily. See, we don't really know what Pettersson wants for a contract. There has been some. I know Elliot Friedman had made mention that he wonders if a player like Pettersson, who just comes across as being very intelligent and kind of studious of other players, that he may take the more of the Auston Matthews type approach. And maybe he's going to want a shorter term deal and then maybe do a long-term deal on the next term. So, for example, looking at his age, being in his mid-20s, maybe he wants to be, do a 4 or 5 year contract next. and then do an 8-year deal to get him into his later 30s. Like, for example, why not, do a shorter term deal so that you can re-up sooner and get even more money on that next contract rather than lock in for 8 years now. Now, that's either way, regardless of what he wants, he's going to be able to command big money. He certainly has put the time in with Vancouver, and he's got the results to back it up. He's very talented, one of the top centers in the league. Lots to like about his game. So certainly, it would be surprising to me if he did leave Vancouver. We don't really know at this point where negotiations stand. We've heard that everything is cordial, that it's not imminent whatsoever, that they're probably going to talk more in the new year, and we don't really know more than that right now. But, he's having a good season. He had a really good season last year. He's going to be able to command big money. A team like Chicago, if they really want to accelerate their rebuild, they would be able to be a player in the open market when it comes to trades and free agency, because they're going to have way more salary cap space than a lot of other teams. They also have a player named Connor Bedard who is shown to be extremely talented, skilled, exciting, one of the most talented players to come into the NHL in a really long time. And I think it's getting people, interested in playing with them. They're thinking, okay, if I want to get the big money and I can't get it where I'm at, maybe I'll consider going to Chicago. All of a sudden, that's all it takes for a team to have a first overall, game-changing player to come into their organization. All of a sudden, everybody wants to play with this player, and they're willing to take what the offers are. Like, it changes a lot. It really does. Now, Chicago has a bunch of other prospects in the system. This is not like it's a completely empty prospect pool cupboard. Is it really, really deep, though? Not yet. And at the end of the day, they're likely still going to have a very high pick this year. Are they going to probably pick top 5 again? Most likely. So they're probably going to get another really good player as well. Could that player jump to the NHL right away? It's possible. Depends on who they end up selecting, of course. If not, within a year or so. But really, if you think about it, with the Blackhawks having tons and tons of salary cap space available, they could overpay to bring in some superstars to play with Connor Bedard. There's no doubt they could absolutely do it. Now, with William Nylander, we know that it's expected, based on Toronto media, saying that talks between the Leafs and Nylander's camp have never really stopped, but they haven't really been really all that serious or really getting anything done. So it's expected that they're going to pick up here early in the new year is what we've heard. We know that Nylander's likely looking for something in the $11+ million range. Would it put it past William Nylander to take it all the way to free agency? I really don't think it would. As much as I do believe William Nylander would love to be a Maple Leaf for the rest of his career, I also believe that William Nylander isn't fazed by much. He's pretty laid back, has a pretty carefree attitude, and to be honest, I don't think he really would be fazed to push things right to July 1 when free agency opens and have an opportunity to speak to other teams and kind of make the Leafs sweat. Like, to be honest, he wants what he wants. We know the Nylander clan can be pretty stubborn, and they are going to stand firm for what they feel their value is. And that's totally justified. He's put up great numbers and done great things for the Maple Leafs, and he deserves to be paid for it. So there's no doubt if the Leafs decide they want to play hardball and they don't want to go to the $11 million spot, or if Chicago gets the chance to speak to him and they do want to overpay a bit and they want to go up 12, 13, that's going to give them something long and hard to think about. Say it's not just a case of the lowly Blackhawks rebuilding, trying to bring in a star name. They have star power now to build around. This is an intriguing player that players are going to want to consider playing with if they have the opportunity while getting paid, a ridiculous amount of money to do so. So even though I'm not completely convinced this is going to happen by any means, I'm not really sure that either player is going to make it to market, because if they do, that's a different scenario, obviously. Can I see Nylander making it to free agency? Yeah, I can. But I can also see the Leafs making a big push to get him signed here in the second half of the season, offering him, pretty fair valued money. And I wouldn't be completely shocked if they get something done. To be honest, like I said before, they're going to end up with 4 forwards now, making over $10 million a year, tying up a ton of money. I don't know that it's going to make the team better, because they're going to end up given all of the salary cap increase coming next year to Nylander just to retain him. And they're still going to be in a situation where they're going to struggle to pay much money to their depth players and the surrounding cast, because they're not going to have the space to be able to pay a lot for that talent to surround those top 4 players. And that's been a big part of the struggle, getting them over the hump and getting them further along in the playoffs. Obviously, the rest of this regular season and how they do in the playoffs, I think will probably change not only, or have at least a big impact on Nylander's decision, but also on the team's decision on how they move forward. I do know that they don't really want to lose him for nothing. I don't see them trading him at the deadline regardless of where things stand with the negotiations. They will want to take every chance they can to make sure they try and get Nylander signed to remain a Leaf long term. That's obviously the goal here for both sides. When it comes to Pettersson, it's even more shocking to hear his name mentioned in this rumor, given the fact that Vancouver is doing so well. You would think that he would be all about wanting to continue to build on that and take it further and try to have more playoff success and eventually win a Stanley Cup in Vancouver with his teammates that he's, worked and battled with for the last number of years. Obviously, the rumor about him in Chicago, I think, was more combination of wanting to get a chance to be, obviously to get the contract he wants, and also at the same time to hook up with a fellow countryman of William Nylander, and they can both build around Connor Bedard with what they can bring to the table as well. It's an intriguing thought. Obviously we'll have to wait and see if this rumor has any validity to it. If I had to make a bet today, to be honest, I would probably be more willing to take the bet that both of these players stay with their existing clubs, because I don't know that we have enough information right now to suggest the odds are in favor of them leaving. Right now, I think the odds are in favor of them staying, but lots of negotiating is left to be done. It may not go well, and if it doesn't, this is a team who can swoop in here with tons of space and overpay to bring more star power to the Windy City to build around a young, phenomenal talent in Connor Bedard. Obviously, Bedard's going to get a huge contract coming out of his ELC. There's no doubt about that, the way he started his career. However, there's not a lot of other younger talent on that team that's going to be in that same kind of category. Do they have other young talent that definitely looks like they fit with the team long term? Yes, absolutely there is. Is there young players who will likely be re-signed and be a part of the solution there beyond their rookie contracts? Absolutely. But is there anybody that's right now sticking out to get a huge payday? Not necessarily. There'll be smaller contracts, bridge contracts, that type of thing. So really, if they wanted to spend big money on some other big top talent like these two players to come in the first 2, 3, 4 years of the contracts, they may not really have a cap issue at all. It could take some time before they get there. And then obviously these guys are going to be getting to the back half of these contracts. So, and the cap is going to be, up a lot more in the next 3 to 5 years before that gets to that point. So it could be a very interesting summer if any of this comes true. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you had to place a bet today that they're going to end up in Chicago, or if they're going to stay with their existing clubs, let me know what you think down below. And if you think there's anything to this rumor, let me know in the comments. It should be a fun discussion down there and to see what everybody thinks. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.